You are selling your house and you have worked really hard to get it ready to go to market. You have cleaned, you have staged it properly, you have kept your beds made and the dishes done and the curb appeal in great shape, and buyers have come through. They've fallen in love with your house and they have written you an offer. Or maybe you have multiple offers. In this market, that could happen. But how do you select the best offer? How do you know that you are getting the best offer for your situation? Selecting the best offer when your house is for sale, that's what we're talking about today, and we're starting right now. I'm Sherry Ann Green with Coldwell Banker. Welcome to my YouTube channel that guides home sellers and home buyers in Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia. So when you're selling your house, you're hopefully going to get an offer. If you've priced it correctly, cleaned it well, presented it well, you're going to get an offer on your house, and depending on the market situation, you could get multiple offers on your house. So how do you know that you're choosing the best offer? I'm going to give you 6 tips today to go through to make sure that you are selecting the best offer for your situation. Tip number 1 is to know the process. So when an offer comes in or multiple offers come in, you are going to want to review every single offer. When you get an offer, there are 3 things you can do. Accept it right away, negotiate the offer, or reject it outright. So if you get a perfect offer right out of the gate, you can accept it. If you get an offer that just is in no way going to meet your terms, you can reject it. However, I subscribe to the counterculture theory, and I've talked about that in some prior videos, and I'll link those in the description. It is always in your best interest to counter. But nevertheless, going through the steps of what we're talking about today, you can accept, you can reject, or you can negotiate. If you do choose to counter, once you send that offer back to the buyer, they can do the same thing. They can accept your counter, reject your counter altogether, or negotiate back. Those negotiations between the seller and the buyer can go on for a few days. Sometimes they happen in a matter of hours, but sometimes they can take days to figure out. So don't be discouraged if the countering process, the negotiation process, takes a little bit of time. It means both parties are working to get to that end goal of you selling your house and the buyer purchasing it. The second tip I'm going to give you to find the right offer on your house is to not take the process personally. Don't get emotional. It is hard to do that. I know it's much easier for me to say that to you than for you to put that in practice. This is your home. But this is a transaction. So it is worth identifying the terms that would be beneficial to you, that you would be agreeable to take, or that you would be agreeable to change, and try to negotiate that without taking it personally. The buyer does not know you, and they are not trying to offend you with their offer. They are simply trying to get the best value that they can for the home that they are going to live in and own. And if you can think back to what it was like to be a buyer of that house yourself, you may be able to put yourselves in their shoes for a bit. And that's the other part of this tip, is to think like the other person. So sometimes to get what we want, we have to give on the other side. So what is it that they want in order for us to get what we want? And that's a very important part of the negotiation process, is thinking like each side of the process, thinking like the buyer, thinking like yourself, the seller, and finding a way for the 2 parties to come to an agreement. My third tip is to think about your bottom line. And when I say that, I don't just mean the financing part. What is the bottom line for you in every term that could be presented in that contract? What is your timeline? What is your financial bottom line? What is your bottom line on the number of home inspections or the number of days that the home inspections can happen? What is your bottom line on the amount that should be put down as the earnest money deposit? Those are the bottom line items that you want to think about, and think about which ones you can be flexible on. Here are some examples. If the day that you close is important to you, if you are on a very strict timeline, you may be okay with giving up some of the purchase price amount in order to meet that deadline for yourself. Maybe you need a post-settlement occupancy agreement. Maybe you can't move into your new home just yet, so you need to spend some time in your current home after you close. Maybe negotiating that post-settlement occupancy agreement so you have the funds ahead of time and can then move later would be helpful to you. And again, maybe that is a term where the buyer is willing to help with that piece of the transaction so that you can sell the house to them and you can move when it's appropriate for you and they can get the house that they want. The bottom line is this: decide what you can be flexible on. Decide what you can negotiate on before you get to that negotiation period so that you are ready to make the right decision for yourself when the offer is in your hand. My fourth tip in reviewing offers on the sale of your home is to review every single term. There are often times that a seller will move straight to the dollar figure. And I know that is important. Seeing the bottom line of what that sales price will be is absolutely the most important factor for most sellers. But make sure you review every other term of that offer. How much are they putting down for their earnest money deposit? How much are they putting down in a down payment if they are getting a mortgage? How many days do you have to get to the closing table? Is there enough time? Is there too much time? How many days do they want a home inspection? Do they even want a home inspection? Is there an appraisal contingency? Is there a finance contingency? Are there other contingencies or repairs that they are already asking right up front in that contract? You want to review every single term to make sure that you understand the total contract, not just the dollar amount, so that you can feel comfortable with all the terms that you too have to follow to get to the closing table. My fifth tip is to do your research. And actually, your agent may have to do this research, but here's what I'm talking about. If your buyer, the buyer of your home, is getting a mortgage, there should be a pre-approval letter or a pre-underwritten letter attached to that offer. You want to call that lender, have your agent call that lender, and have a discussion about the buyer. You want to know that the lender and the buyer have a great working relationship. The lender may give some insights into the strength of that offer. They may give you some insights into their credit report, and if it is one that is positive, they may give you some insights to if the buyer's price can escalate. And if you are in a multiple offer situation, it is radically important that you know the answer if that buyer can elevate their price tag according to what they have put in their escalation clause. You may even find out if the lender can close on the loan in a shorter period of time. You also want to make sure that the lender has done their due diligence and seen the accounts where the funds will come from for the closing cost and the down payment. So tip number 5 is to do your research and make sure that your agent has had a very good discussion with the buyer's lender. Tip number 6 is to be creative. So let's say you've gotten an offer and off the bat, it is not what you were looking for. It was not what you were expecting, and it's not an offer that you think will work for your situation. Have a very detailed discussion with your agent and have your agent speak to the buyer's agent and see what it is that's really important to the buyer. We talked earlier about you coming to terms with your bottom line. What's the buyer's bottom line? Do they need to move sooner? Do they need to move later? Do they need to have an inspection because they have a special condition that they want to make sure is covered in the home? There are all sorts of things that you just may not know about, and it might be helpful to have that discussion to discover creative ways that the two parties can come together. The idea here is for you to decide up front what your terms are, what your conditions are, and then to negotiate what's just not as important to you. Those things may be important to the buyer, and so in the end, it's a win-win for everybody. There is a lot to think about when you are going to sell your home, and I am here to help. This video is what you should watch next. It's my 30-day guide to get you ready to sell your house. There are a lot of things to think about, and I've got a checklist included with this video that I think you'll find helpful.